Okay, now it's setting it up. This is working better.
I think it's live now. It says live on Facebook.
Yeah. Redirecting. And you should be good to go.
Okay. We are live? Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We're looking forward to a great conversation today about defunding the GRPD. My name is Dana Montgomery. I'm one of the core leadership team members of Defund the GRPD Campaign Coalition. And just thank you so much for being here. I'm excited for a good conversation. I want to start off today just by giving a brief history of Defund the GRPD campaign, because I know that some of you may not, this might be your first experience seeing us or seeing kind of what we are, that kind of thing. So just wanted to give a brief history of who we are, how we came to be, that kind of thing. So Defund the GRPD started over the summer during some of the racial uprisings over the summer. We recognized the need to mobilize to decrease the police budget and to work through some of the issues of policing. So 5 groups came together to host an action week. Those groups included Movimiento Cosecha, GR Rapid Response to ICE, Together We Are Safe, The People's Budget, and Grand Rapids Area Mutual Aid Network. We hosted a week of action, which included digital action. We hosted a press conference. We sent countless letters and phone calls and that kind of thing to the city commission and the mayor and that kind of thing. It was pretty successful. Unfortunately, at the end of that week, the city commission did not vote to decrease the police budget, and since then have just continued to give the police more money. In fact, since then, some funding that they got from the CARES Act, they have just used to give more money to the GRPD. The Grand Rapids Police Department is one of the most funded departments in the nation, in the state of Michigan, but also has some of the highest complaints of discrimination with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. So we recognize that this didn't just need to be 1 week of action, right? It needed to be a sustained effort to work to defund the Grand Rapids Police Department and refund our communities. So we also recognize the need to continue this work because ultimately Defund the GRPD doesn't believe that the police are reformable, and we operate under the framework of abolition. So ultimately, when we say defund the Grand Rapids Police Department, we are ultimately hoping for the abolition of the Grand Rapids Police Department. But we realize that we can't have abolition today. We need to build other models of community accountability, community support. We also recognize that other community members might not be where we're at, or they might not be operating under the same framework that we are, but we still have to move this conversation forward and talk to each other, correct? So that's why we're here today. We just want to bring the community to have this conversation about the GRPD. We know the phrase defund the GRPD might be controversial, but we need to have this conversation. We need to talk to each other and figure out ways to move forward, because right now it's more important than ever to have this conversation. So thank you for being here and for continuing this conversation with us. Just a few updates before we get into the conversation. If you have a question that you have not yet submitted, feel free to submit those in the Facebook comments, and we will we will address those via Facebook comments. If you've submitted a question via text or via our messages, we monitored those, and we will be including those in the conversation. Feel free to interact with this video. Feel free to leave a comment. We'll be monitoring those comments and including them into our conversation. I also wanted to give a few updates about what's going on with the Defund the GRPD campaign coalition, what are the work that we're doing, and just so you kind of know what we are and what we're doing for the community. So one thing that we're committed to is giving commission meeting summaries. So the city commission hosts meetings every 2 weeks, is it? I think it's every 2 weeks. And we have folks that watch those fully in completion, and then they write summaries, because we know that sometimes we don't have 2 hours in a day to be able to watch those city commission meetings. So we have summaries for each of those meetings. So this is a picture on the screen of just a photo we have with 3 takeaways from the meeting. So that's an example of the meeting from yesterday. 3 takeaways that we noticed about from the city commission meeting, but we also have a larger Google Doc, which is about 2 pages long, which is coming up on the screen. And that has a more comprehensive summary of those meetings. We think those are important because often there's a lot of decisions that are made during those city commission meetings. There's a time for public comment. People can call in and comment on something, but sometimes they're hard to understand and hard to navigate. So it's important to make those accessible to us. We also have recently launched our police contact report form. This is a contact form where you can report different interactions you have with the police. So sometimes it's easy to think, oh, police brutality just happens in Missouri or Philly or Florida or wherever, but we want to emphasize that it happens here too. There's tons of different stories of police violence. Any Black and brown person that I've talked to in Grand Rapids almost has a story of either they personally had a story with police violence, or they know somebody that has a story with police violence. So this is a form. You can completely remain confidential and anonymous if you want to, but we want to collect these stories because we know that stories have power. And so if we say it doesn't just happen in Missouri, it doesn't just happen somewhere else, but it happens here, we believe that holds power. We are looking to collect these stories and eventually have a documentary where we're sharing these stories of police violence and that kind of thing. So you can stay completely anonymous or you can share your name. Either way, we're just looking for those stories. It also doesn't have to be something that happened recently. It can be something that happened 8 years ago and you just remembered and you want to share your story. That can also happen as well. We also are excited to announce that we have some magnets that are available to order. Here's a picture of the magnets. These are refrigerator magnets. As we were saying before, we need to think of alternatives to police, right? So think of ways where we can support each other and come together as a community to support each other. So we have ordered some magnets with community resources that are alternatives to police. Because for sometimes people think that they might have to call the police over domestic violence encounters, or they might have to call the police over an abandoned car outside of those. But we want to limit police interactions because we know oftentimes they do result in violence for Black and brown people. So these are fridge magnets, helpful fridge magnets that you can have on your fridge that has resources for domestic violence, homelessness, that kind of thing. And you can just, if you're in need of those, you can think, oh, do I really need to call the police? And look at those magnets and order those. So they're for free and we will actually deliver them to you as well. You just have to, there's an order form that is going to be the link for that is going to be posted in the comments on our Facebook page. And you can order how many of the magnets you need. If you want to pass them out to your neighbors or your family or that kind of thing, you just let us know where you would like to distribute them and we'll get you your magnets delivered. Yep, and then you just put your contact info and how you would like them delivered and we'll get them to you. Like I said, there's still some time to submit questions for this conversation via the Facebook chat. So if you have a question that you would like to ask our panelists, then please put that in the Facebook comments. I will have those announcements again at the end, but I think it's time to jump into our conversation. I'd like to introduce our panelists. Today we have Allie, Kyle, Walter, LaDonna, and Sharon. Thank you so much for being here. We are very excited for this conversation. These are all movers and shakers within the city of Grand Rapids, people who are wanting to see change, who are inspiring change, that kind of thing. And we are just so happy to be able to have all of these powerful voices with us today. I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves because I want people to be able to self-identify how they see themselves in the community. So if each of you want to just take a little bit of time and introduce yourself, and then we'll get started on the conversation. Allie, could you start us off with an introduction?
Hi, everyone. My name is Allie or Alyssa. I'm the president and founder of Just for Black Lives. We were the ones that put on a lot of the protests throughout the summer, revolving around racial injustice. And we've also been doing some community work, especially in the Third Ward.
Thanks, Allie. Kyle?
Hey everybody, my name's Kyle Lim. One of my jobs, I work for UCC or Urban Core Collective as a strategist, and most of my work is around education justice and police violence.
Thanks, Kyle. Walter?
Yeah, my name is Walter, and I just be helping around. I just recently started going downtown helping the unhoused, delivering like blankets, clothes, and feeding them, with out of my own resources and pocket, and try to help them because it seems like no one else is kicking in for real, for real. It's a select few.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Walter.
You're welcome.
LaDonna?
My name is LaDonna Norman. I'm with Together We Are Safe. I am a policing and housing advocate.
Thanks, LaDonna.
Thank you.
Sharon?
Hi, I'm Sharon.
I think we lost you. I think you got muted there, Sharon.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Sharon. I've been helping out with the community for quite some time now, although I haven't did anything in a while. So I've been quite busy with other stuff, but is it right?
It's facing the, can you see her?
No.
No.
So right here. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, that's
as
okay.
well.
Let me see.
Did it go back?
Sometimes it take a minute to jump in.
That's okay. We're rolling with the punches.
Okay. Yeah, I was saying I've been helping out with the community for quite some time, but although I haven't been involved in a little while because I had a lot going on myself, but I love helping out with the community, because it's, we need as many people as we can get. We need everybody to, step in and help out. So I'm here.
Thank you, Sharon. All right. With further ado, we're going to jump into our first question. Like I said, this is a conversation. So if our panelists hear something that they want to respond to that another panelist has said, feel free. I'm going to address the first question to Walter, but however, anybody can jump in after Walter has finished answering the question. So our first one is, what kinds of experiences and interactions have you had with the police in your community or neighborhood? And what have you seen or observed? Walter, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
I done had a lot of interactions with the law. Some was my fault and others weren't. And the ones that weren't my fault, it was just like stereotype. Because I was in the neighborhood and they said I fit the description of a drug dealer. I was like, what does he look like? Tomorrow, you. So, I try to address that with, back then it was a chief of police, Harry Dolan, got nowhere. So, it kind of like made me bitter towards the system because I feel like they have this model where it's protect and serve, but they don't serve you right. So, and I feel like what you guys are coming to right now is like come together as unity and find a different solution for that. Because go to jail and they just look at you like, oh well. And it's sad to say, we need to see more minorities in the inner city that can really relate to, not looking for like a favoritism or anything like that, but just like can relate to us.
Yeah. I think that's a good point of if you aren't connected to that community, how do you expect to protect and serve that community?
Correct.
Mhm. Mm. Anybody have anything to add there about their experiences and interactions with police?
I'll start. I think my earlier interactions with police involvement started when I was younger, but as I had children earlier at a young age, it was suggested by the social workers that come into the house, there was like a format of how they would want you. If your child, say for instance, if your child act up and you couldn't control them, call the police. And I didn't realize that in the long run, I was building a case against my own child when I just didn't have proper support and resources. And so I've come to say, as a community, I think everybody needs support, and with the proper resources and the proper support, that social workers aren't able to come in and say, yeah, when you have a problem with your child, call the police. They're not parents. They're not the parents of our children. They're not going to be there at night. They're not going to be there during the day. They're just like a temporary solution while your child may be acting out, but it's not a very good one, and it's not a very effective one, because to this day I'm trying to reestablish a relationship with my child as a result of just following the recommendations of the social worker.
Yeah, I think that brings up a good point, because I think sometimes during the conversation about defunding the police, we often say, oh, just bring in social workers, right? But oftentimes we don't think about how social workers work hand in hand with the police, and sometimes are committing as much harm as the police and are stereotyping these Black and brown kids, right? Like kids who they're feeding them to the system often. I mean, my background is in social work, so I know that, they do a lot of good, but I also know that they can do some messed up stuff.
And not only that, Dana, I believe that a lot of these social workers aren't experienced. They're not parents, and that they're going by textbook responses or a textbook order. And it bothers me. It's troublesome, because now 20 years later, I'm able to say, hey, that was a big problem for my family. It wasn't a solution for my family. And what other young parents are experiencing this? I mean, how will we help other young parents get through problems with their children?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes these kids are acting out because they see the parents overwhelmed. They don't necessarily see that the police are helping. They see they're acting out for a cry for help. When parents are overwhelmed, kids tend to react.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's something that I want to work on in the future, to make sure that another parent doesn't experience what I did, and maybe another social worker out here say, maybe that's not what you want to do, is call the police. What kind of safety plans can we put in place for this family and for this child,
Mm-hmm.
and for the community?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed for sure.
Can I just offer something there, Dana? I just really appreciate that you sharing that story, LaDonna. I think what it brings up for me is the way in which like all of these systems are intertwined, but the common thread is like they're trying to control Black and brown folks, like that to me is like the way in which you just articulated like the social service system and how that goes hand in hand with police. Like those weren't meant to be freeing systems. Those weren't meant to be liberatory systems for folks. Those are joint systems of control.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I saw this video today of this woman who was speaking at a commission meeting or something like that, and she said, I'm not going to ask you for anything because I can't get freedom from my oppressor. And I just thought, yeah, yeah, it's all these systems work hand in hand together to control Black and brown folks, right? That's the goal often. So yeah.
Can I just add another thing that a lot of the police officers are Caucasian, and a lot of them only have an education. They don't have a background in dealing with people of color. They have no direct connection with people of color. They're not even from our community. And I think right there, that says it all, that if you're not with your community, if you're not from that community, then you're just doing your job.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to another question. And LaDonna, I'll have you start with this one. But we often use the phrase, we take care of us and we are all we got, and that kind of thing. And that emphasizes community support, taking care of our neighbors, community accountability. And I'm wondering, what does community support look like to you? What would you like to see with neighbors taking care of neighbors?
So what community support looks like for me is like take it back old school. I come from a strong background, a strong community where there were neighborhood watches, but we watched each other. We didn't police each other. And I think that with this generation, the times of the generation is different. And so we have to approach it different. I'd love to go back to when it was old school and you know, you couldn't backlip the neighbor no matter the color of them, no matter the age of them. It was like, okay, no, you're not going to talk to me like that. I'm going to go and have a conversation with your mom. And then you when they have that conversation with your mom, you're getting scolded by your mom based on what that neighbor said. It's not whether you're right or wrong. It's like the neighbor said that that's what you were doing. And so I'm inclined to believe the neighbor said you were acting out. So when I say we're all we have and we all we got, I say it in a sense like, let's see to the needs of our community. What are the needs of the parents? Do we need respite? Is the parent a single parent? Is it a 2-parent household? Is there food in the house? There's all kinds of factors that go into supporting the community. How are the elders being supported? How are the young people being supported? So when I say we are all we got, we are all we got. There's been cases where I've went to people's house. Hey, you know what? Let me watch your kids while you step out and get you some air, get you an hour of me time and come back. By me doing that, that gives the parent the opportunity to reflect on what happened and maybe smoke a cigarette, whatever they want to do to diffuse their emotions right then and there. So I think that plays a role in it too. We have to find out what we need as a community. And if we're not together in unity with the community, how can we do that? Because sometimes our own people tend to be the same threat as the police because they're doing what they know. They're doing what comes natural. Oh, no, you're getting loud. We're not going to talk about why you're getting loud. We're just going to call the police because I can't handle this. When there's a confrontation, there's no need to always say you can call the police. How come we can't talk about it? I mean, there's no harm in talking. Sometimes people are loud when, especially people of color, when they tend to get excited. There's no threat there. There's no immediate threat where I feel the police are needed. I've been called for a lot of times just for support or just for somebody to be a neutral party into whatever is going on. Maybe they just want to rant for 5-10 minutes. It's what kind of support we can have in the community to help one another. So when I say we all we got, baby, we all we got.
Yeah, the revolution must be intergenerational, right? I think I saw that on Didi Delgado's page yesterday. Like, it can't just be, us talking at older folks and older folks talking at the young folks. We all got to talk to each other and figure out how we can survive together, right? So I think that's really good insight.
I think what we run into is the language is different now. For the generation, just the generation, and a lot of older people are not knowing how to communicate with the young people. and the young people aren't able to communicate with the older people just because the language is different with the generation.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. That's very true. Mhm. I know, and so speaking of that, Allie, I want to address this question to you. But we know that the Southeast side has seen high rates of violence this year, and that's something that we need to talk about, right? That's something that we have to get younger folks and older folks and people together in a room to talk about, and what are the root causes of that. But I'm wondering, from your perspective, and others can chip in, of course, what impact has that had on the community, and what are your opinions on how the police have responded to this increase in violence?
With the pandemic, people already that already sparked fear, people not wanting to go outside, and then being under quarantine and not really having that much to do. And then this violence is going on. It's having a lot of effect on the community. It's only increasing that fear. And with Grand Rapids Police Department's response, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It's terrible. I live on the southeast side, and GRPD only needs about 20, 30 officers to patrol the entire city. Chief Payne told me that himself. So for GRPD to say, oh, we have enough officers to put 5 times the amount on the southeast side, that's not okay. Highly militarizing the area when everyone knows that the main root to these issues are lack of funding and lack of resources. No gun buyback, no state choppers flying over the city is going to help that. We need more funding. Adding more police to the area is only going to increase the issue. You can't fight fire with fire. You're just going to have an even bigger fire.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can I weigh in here too? I think that there's a misconception that like when we have stuff going on in our communities, in our neighborhoods, and we recognize like people not feeling safe, all that kind of stuff, that the police are actually about safety. Like they're not about safety. And if anybody's actually like had an interaction with the police, or if your interaction with the police has progressed past like just an on the street interaction, like once you get into the system, like that is so violent itself. So we're saying what we're trying to do is like take these kids that are doing like, or whoever's that are doing like violent stuff, and we're meeting it with a violent system. And like, that's just not the way, you know? And so like what LaDonna asked earlier, like we need to go in and find out what our community needs. Like, I feel like we need to be going in and having these conversations with young folks. Like, what do y'all need right now? Like, what do y'all need to show up different? You know, like, I don't think that people just show up like this out of nothing. But we're not taking the time to actually do that. All we're doing is going in, locking folks up, putting them back into another really violent system that like destroys our communities, our families, our communities, all of that. So I just think we need to really, really uncouple this idea that when things are happening in our communities, that the answer is police to increase our safety. Police don't increase our safety. They throw us back into another violent system, and we just keep getting hurt, keep getting hurt, keep getting hurt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Police
Yeah.
don't stop crimes, they come after they happen. And bragging on Facebook about how many people they arrested is not helping the situation either, especially with their new strategic plan talking about how they want to increase community trust and be about community policing. Like, it's hypocritical.
Well, how can they get the community's trust when they can't even distinguish a 12-year-old from a 25-year-old? I'm a little, I was always taught that when you go looking for trouble, you'll find it. There's some bias there. When you come into our community, there is an automatic fear of police. So of course, my nonverbals are going to speak louder than my verbals. Does that justify you checking me or shaking me down? Are we still there?
Yeah. We're just soaking it all in, LaDonna.
The screen went blank. I wasn't sure, but
Oh, it did.
but I'm really, it goes hand in hand with, there's no positive interactions. How can you get trust when you haven't earned that trust? Because where I am right now is, if you can't distinguish a 12-year-old from an 18-year-old, we have a problem. And then at what time do our children stop being children? At what point in time do children of color stop being children? Because the Grand Rapids Police Department has clearly not made, what's the word I'm looking for? Help me out. But they haven't established trust, because they haven't established who's a 12-year-old and who's a 19-year-old. Our kids tend to look more mature than white people.
But then they come up with like a youth policy and they think that it's all good, right? They say,
How many times
okay,
have they broke that policy?
right, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and then that's why these programs like, the city's job programs with the youth employment program, where they were creating a bunch of jobs, and they were like trying to have this thing where they're chronically underpaying Black and brown kids. I'm like, no, F out of here. No, because
You mean the jobs that these young folks couldn't even get to on the bus line? Those jobs?
The jobs that
So
they're
are you creating a
and
solution by employing them and giving them jobs that they can't even get to? Where's the trust in that? How can I trust you to be neutral with my child in police interaction, and you can't even get your story straight? They're spending all this money because, of course, it's COVID, Dana. You have to spend money to make money. And when they're in our community, we're the ones that are paying those fines. We're the ones that are getting incarcerated. Due to COVID, nothing is moving, the court system or the police. And when it's moving, it's biased. So I think now let me just say this. I recognize that there's crime in our communities. There's crime in all communities. But when you're not making money, what kind of scenarios are you doing and painting to get a reaction, a fearful reaction out of community folks? Because it seems like people of color are running to get out of the inner city in the state of Michigan because they're fearful of the violence. But yet the housing value and the property value have significantly skyrocketed. How does that happen? How can you tell me that there's a $200,000 house where it's a shooting every day? You make it make sense. You want me to trust you, but you can't even give me a straight answer. Make it make sense. If this is a high crime area and they're just setting it off and they have nothing to do but to go around and shoot each other and be gon-ho, how is that possible? What kind of scenarios? And I'm not saying that kids aren't involved in crime. We're in COVID. There's not a lot to do. But what kind of scenarios are being created to cause a reaction with the young folks? Like you said, we're asking to defund the police, but they're putting more money into the police department, right?
Yeah.
How does that work?
My thought around like how housing values are going up even when there's crime is it makes the case for more police. And police come in, they clean it all up, turn that neighborhood from Baxter into East Hills, right? That's the same story that happened.
Yep.
Police came in, cleaned up all the crime, and suddenly your housing value triples. And who profits off the back of that? Not Black and brown communities, right? So, I mean, it's like they use the opportunity of when like hurt is happening in our communities to make a profit off of it. Like that's jacked up. I don't know if we can cuss on this thing.
You can cuss. You can cuss.
Well, that's fucked up.
I didn't know about the F word. But
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry.
This is a PG-13 live, y'all. We're keeping
Oh, I'm
it.
sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I like for us to be real, and we're not allowed to say these things in other spaces, right? So let's be real about it. So, Kyle, I'm gonna address this next one to you, and then we can get the conversation going. But speaking of that, like, they shouldn't be allowed to do these things, right? This should not be okay. And we're wondering, what are some good ways to hold politicians, elected officials, city leaders accountable in this conversation about policing, and wrapped up with housing, wrapped up with youth development, that kind of stuff. And what would you say is important to understand about how these policies work?
Yeah, I think first it's I think really important to understand that policies are to support institutions. They're not meant to change them. And so quite honestly, I don't think that we can policy our way out of this situation right now. And I think the best way for us to be holding folks accountable is exactly what the Defund Coalition, what Allie and Justice for Black Lives, what LaDonna doing in the Stop the Violence Walk. Like, we direct action to be able to hold folks accountable and tell people what we need and what we want is exactly what needs to happen right now. You know, and the policy stuff will follow then, but it's going to require a fundamental shift, I think, in how we're thinking about safety in our communities, right? And if our long-term vision is not just to defund the police, but towards a society where we don't have to have police, right? Where police are abolished. Like, policy interventions don't feel like the right kind of move to me right now. So I think that there might be a place for policy down the road, but in this moment that we're in, I don't know that that's the answer, quite honestly. And I think that we need to really push for different kinds of structural arrangements. And that's why I think that the move to defund the police is such a powerful one, because it makes space for that. It says we're going to take money away from this system that we know creates harm and invest it in other systems that we know create health and well-being and preserve the well-being of our communities. Like, though, that's what needs to happen right now. And there's not a policy tweak outside of it, in my mind.
Hey, excuse me. But then the thing is about the policies, they always break them and bend them so it's to their advantage still. So then, you know, it's quite bogus to me, you know, to just say we created this policy when you got a lot of politicians and different other people. They don't never get a community a chance to voice their input to say we'll come up with a different solution. But the policies, if you know, every day they change. Oh, we changed this policy. Oh, when you do that just today. They break them and make them as they go along, which is crazy to me. I'm clueless on that one.
And who is making sure that they stick to those policies? Like, we don't have the power to do that.
Nope.
We don't have the power to make sure that they're, you know, like, so I just don't think that that's the way forward right now. We can't keep doing this. We just talked about the youth policy, you know. How many times they came out with that, and then it was like the next week they were cuffing some other kids.
Yeah, look, prime example. Years ago, they did it. It went smooth for a minute. Then it just stopped. They stopped harassing the little teenage youth kids or hanging around little parks. You know, that's what little kids frequent, like Siemens Center, Youth Boys and Girls Club. Even though it's run by the police, quote unquote, but they harass those kids coming from there. But then, oh, we got it under control. Now here you go. A couple years ago, they just pulled guns out on little kids and had them in the middle of the street. Why? And that's the main reason why it creates a bad vibe with children and the youth with the police. And the topic of this situation should be like this: if you do a kid wrong, he not gonna like you. It's just like a dog. You keep messing with a dog, he gonna bite you. And these people, they're making them into monsters. They already stereotype the black and brown people. And then when we do something, they be like, oh, he's barbaric. But we don't ever look at what led up to this issue. And not only that, like something LaDonna was talking about earlier, not to go away from your question, Kyle. I did a lot of wrong when I was younger, prison, jails, breaking the law. But now I do more right than wrong. And me, I feel like more guys that put in, as we call it, street term, put in work in the streets and got ourselves together. And we get out and come together and start just go around and talk to these youths. And we talked to 20 kids and reached 3. I think we did a good job. Can't reach everybody. Because, and then not only that, I'm still baffled. Why are y'all walking around with guns that they using over in the war, pulling them out on people? Why? And you know, do you wonder why people, oh, they got this, I'm gonna go upgrade because they might, I never know when they're gonna kill me. You got people now, you get pulled over, they just put their hands up like, whoa, put your hands down. I did that before. I'm like, whoa, I don't want no trouble. I don't know. I don't know you like that.
Here comes naturally, doesn't it, come, Walter?
Yeah, I've been in so much trouble with the law. I just be like, oh boy, here we go. What I do wrong? So, and that's crazy to had that kind of fear when you, I don't know.
Yeah, it's almost like a PTSD reaction, right? We often talk about PTSD as like something that happens when people come back from war, but I think Black and brown people have a lot of PTSD when it comes to with the cops. I was driving through the Southeast side over the weekend, and like there was so many cops, and there was like helicopters flying around, and it was like 1 a.m. and my heart was pounding, and I'm like having a very physical reaction, and I'm like, what is going on with me? And I'm like, I am terrified. I'm having an anxiety attack because of all of these cops, because I know that they're just here to mess with me. So it's, you know, it's sad that we have to have some of those reactions. But moving on to kind of how that impacts our community. Sharon, I want to direct this next question to you. In the defunding conversation, we often hear refund the community, and we want to invest in different programs and that kind of thing. Kind of as we were discussing earlier, maybe policy isn't the answer. We have to invest in us and invest in our communities and find alternatives. So what types of programs do you think that money from the budget could be placed, and the types of things that the money could be used for in our community?
Well, I think maybe the schools to help the kids, you know, for learning and stuff. I haven't really given that much thought, but we need something set up where, you know, where our kids can have, you know, during the pandemic, it's hard for everybody. You know, it's hard for families to feed their kids and stuff. You know, I think it's more money should be, you know, go into programs where they can furnish these kids with meals and stuff, you know, because the parents are out of work right now, and you know, and it's hard. It's hard, you know, and the kids are, you know, they're not in school, so they're doing school from home, and it's just not enough. The parents not working, it's just not enough. So I feel like the main thing right now is to think of the kids and the elderly, you know, come up with something where we can help them out, you know, where money can go toward, you know, helping them to get through this.
Can I weigh in on that?
Yep.
You know what? Everybody, the police now has using that pandemic to their advantage. This is not the problem just started today or yesterday. This has been an ongoing problem. Just like years ago, they tried to do a spot shooter. You could take that $1 million and invest it in the community and open up something. They could have been did that. Not just doing a pandemic. They're using that as BS. Feed us to it. Oh, we'll just do a spot shooter. If you look at a spot shooter, you spend $1 million on a spot shooter, you still gonna have gunshots. You look at big cities, that's not clarified nothing. By the time you get there, they gone. Just another body in the street, which is sad, but it's true. This is not a problem. It's been a problem. And they just make it right now, use everyone who want to use this pandemic as an excuse. That to me, that's BS, because this problem been ongoing for years. And if you don't have nothing for the youth to do, what are they gonna do? They're gonna find something, get in trouble. And like the old cliche go, an idle mind is a devil's workshop. Now you give them something to
I
do.
agree with that. I'm sorry. I
Oh, go
agree
ahead.
with that. I raised 5 kids, 2 girls and 3 boys. And when my kids, they are grown-ups now, but when they were coming up, I always told them, the system is set up to help, for you to fail, and I always told them that, you have to be careful out here, and make sure you keep your eyes open and listen, don't talk so much, listen more than you talk. Um, our system, they say the police, when they doing the stuff that they're not supposed to do, they give them the cameras. Okay, they're gonna wear body cameras, but when they get ready to do the stuff that they're not supposed to do, so for some reason the camera wasn't working. The camera was off. Like I told them, it's set up, and they pretty much get away with this stuff. You know, and that's just a prime example of how our system fails our kids. They set it up where they don't want the parents to discipline the kids or anything like that, because it's all a setup. It's all a setup, because if you don't discipline the kids, they're kids. They're gonna go out and do stuff that they're not supposed to do. And if they don't go out and do stuff that they're not supposed to do, I feel like that would they wouldn't have the job that they had if there wasn't nobody getting in trouble. So I feel like they set it up for the kids to go out and do the stuff that they do so they can get in trouble so they can have their job. It's a setup.
And it's designed for you to fail, because when the kids get in trouble, guess who pay for it? The parents.
The parents.
And it's sad.
Exactly.
It is sad, but it's true, because there's always a way for to make money downtown. And how can you, and then not only that, when you do that, instead of, when I was a kid, I was brought up okay. 2 family people in the house, father and mother. But now you got a lot of broken homes, and they don't talk to these kids. They just get out, just talk to them crazy. Come here, I want to grab you up. And why? That's right there. It's a way how you approach somebody, because that's like if I was came on here and be like, call y'all some different names outside of what y'all be like, oh, whoa, 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 whoa. You just violated right there. You didn't even know what the situation is. So to make it a long story short is, they come on to these kids and they make them envy. And now they be like, why'd you run? Hey, what else y'all supposed to do? And that's crazy. People rather run and catch a flea and elude than deal with y'all for not doing nothing.
Yeah. Allie, we'll let y'all have one last comment, and then we're gonna move on to taking some questions from our Facebook comments.
Okay. Is that my cue to go, or?
I don't know if you or Allie were talking first. Allie, I think you had something to say. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Another thing that I feel like would be really helpful to put that funding towards would be making the rapids free, because earlier we had talked about how the whole youth thing, and they gave the youth jobs and they had no way to get there. That also correlates with, on the southeast side, well, the 3rd ward has the highest unemployment rate, and there's very few jobs in that area for people to be able to get there, to be able to work locally, work around where they live. And with that forces people to have to go outside their communities. Well, how are you going to go outside your community if you don't have a way to get there? You don't have a job, you don't have money to pay for the bus, and you have to have exact change for the bus anyways. I feel like that'd be very helpful.
Yeah, that's good. I recently heard that there's not free transfers anymore. I just learned about that. I think that's crazy. That's wild. During a pandemic, they're making it so there's no more free transfers. That's just
money.
Yeah, and they stopped having because before they had, you can pay a certain amount of money for a card for a month, and then you can get unlimited rides for that month. But now they're making you put money on a card for the exact amount to get on the bus, instead of it being cheaper to use the month card.
Can I just add that there are no more bus tickets. It's gone to electronic. type of transaction, but not have what everybody doesn't have a debit card and everybody doesn't understand financial literacy like that. When you're getting on the bus and you have $5 and that's all you have and you're not going to give me any change, you've just made it impossible for me to get back from work. How can I work 8 hours and I don't even have a way home?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Plus
Because you're
the
taking
shifts.
all my money, you're not giving change cards, you're not accepting bus tickets. So a lot of these community resources that gave out bus tickets, they're useless.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Can I just also say, like, I think a lot of times when we're talking about like these, what are the programs that we have to invest in? Like, we're telling folks like, stay in school, get a job, like doing all these things, but like schools, I mean, I don't know if y'all have been walking through, y'all walked through Union High School recently. It's like, it's not a dignified and edifying place for young people. People sometimes, it doesn't feel that way. They don't feel, so it's like, and the same thing with a job. Like we tell you, you got to get a job. Well, hell, who can live off of $10 an hour working at Burger King? You know what I mean? It's like,
Not even $10 an hour.
not even $10 an hour. So it's like
$1,200 in rent.
Exactly. So it's like we're pushing people to do these things, but it's like these things don't actually help you survive in the world. They're just other forms of like of oppression, it feels like. So it's like, yes, we want to point people to things, but we need to change those things too. Like, what does it look like for us to have a basic minimum wage in Grand Rapids? What does it look like for us to have schools be places where kids know that they feel loved and safe and protected, right? That's actually a good place for them to learn. Like, we need to do that kind of work too, and not just have these programs like, this job program that the city came out with after this for young people. It's like, that's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Agreed. Well, thank y'all so much for this conversation. I think that y'all all had some gems, and I'm going to be carrying those with me this week. I want to get into some of the questions from the Facebook comments. We'll just have kind of one person jump in per question, and then we'll see where it goes from there. I know that we talked about this, so I want to talk about this question. Someone said, are there going to be any coordinated events regarding the $500,000 implementation of ShotSpotter in our community? Any call-ins and such? Does anyone have anything to add about that?
I think that's a bad idea because shot spotters is useless because right now, the way if you see in the inner city, you don't know what to decipher from gunshots or firework now. And this study gonna be going off. So the police come there, it's a firework, and here's somebody else land that really need their assistance. Money just wasted. To me, it's wasted. It's not take a look at this big cities like Chicago has spot shotters. Look at the crime rate. Which is crazy. Waste of money. Take that money and invest it in the community and give the kids something to do and the youth and the parents. And because everything now you do, they want to charge you. Now you go downtown. Everything used to be, when I was a kid, used to go do free stuff. Not no more. They can't spell free no more. Only thing they want you to do free, the penal system wants you to do free community work. And that's how it takes away a lot of jobs and people get in trouble.
Yep, that's good. Another question we have, in what ways do we think we can get community organizations, especially those serving most vulnerable residents, to stop calling the police? This is true. A ton of nonprofits in Grand Rapids often just call the police on people at the first sign of conflict. So
I think just trying to
I'm sorry, Allie.
de-escalate the situation yourself. Not a lot of I'm downtown a great deal, and you encounter, people maybe trying to cause trouble or don't really agree with what you're doing. Like if you're doing an event, and just mainly just being able to de-escalate the situation and maybe try to get that person to walk away and like have a conversation. Like not everything needs to be through the police at all. Like some things are easily solved by yourself.
I think that oftentimes people have such fear of each other, right? Like, if someone is turning up a little bit, their automatic reaction is fear, and that's a normal reaction. However, we need to evaluate why is our first reaction fear to people. So yeah, I think that's really helpful about just like thinking about that first reaction. Should you de-escalate, that kind of thing? And I want to say this question that we got from the comments. It's kind of about that, which is talk about how the police are there to make white people feel safe, but white people will never feel safe around Black, Indigenous, people of color unless they address their own problem with racism. So wondering if anybody has any insight or wants to talk about how police make white people feel safe.
I think they make the white people, the white population feel comfortable because they feel like they're their own and they're not barbaric. And you know, we have tendencies to get real rowdy. And a lot of African American and brown people, they have high pitched voices. That first thing they do, yeah, 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 yeah. And now here comes the police. Oh, you going? I'm taking you to jail. So you know that's just instinct. You taking me to jail for nothing. When a white person, they just be just as calm. So you know, and we used to break that barrier because if we all come along together, and right now with during this pandemic, everybody should be coming together for real. Because, and they always make it seem like every time you turn on the news, the Black community. What about the other communities? What is a Black community? Because now, just like we touched on the basis earlier, the price value shooting up. We can't afford these houses. We selling and getting out, and the white people moving in. So that's the whole plan. Get us out of there. Take it back.
Can I add that they exploit our crimes as well? Because I think that when you live in a community where it's predominantly your race, if you live in a community where you're white and most of the community are white, of course you're going to have friction with other white people. If you live in a Latino community where it's predominantly Latino, you're going to have problems with Latino. They exploit our crimes and they rationalize their crimes.
It's proximity crime. It's not Black on Black crime. There's no such thing as that. It's that, you know, most races commonly live near each other. So Black people kill Black people, white people kill white people, Hispanics kill Hispanics. It has nothing to do with race. It's all about your proximity. You're more likely to kill your neighbor than some stranger across town.
Yes, very true. And I've tried to just distance myself from the word crime as well, because even, you know, these racist systems gets to decide what a crime is and often decides it based off of racism. I believe in harm. I believe people harm folks, and that's going to happen across any community, no matter what, because we're human. But what is really crime? And what do we consider crime? Or is it harm? Are we harming folks? So, and all communities harm folks in equal ways. So not equally. So yeah, I've just challenged myself to think about that a little bit, about crime, and if that's the word that we should be using to describe people doing harm.
So it's fair for a white officer come in a Black neighborhood and beat up all the Black people? Is that cool?
Right. That's not a crime. That's not a crime.
That's not according to them.
Yeah.
That's just part of their job. We're just doing our job.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of job is that? That's inhumane to me.
Sorry, Walter, keep going.
Yeah, that's inhumane to me, because and then and they wonder why people be like so barbaric, because you just beat him up. I get pulled over for a busted tail light. Now I got a busted eye. Whoa.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes older people be like, he didn't deserve that. And then now it's so bad, I don't know why they still do it. You know you're gonna get caught, because if you don't have your body camera, you best believe technology is far advanced with cell phones. You don't know who's recording.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a good idea. Get them all. You got some, it's just like officers. You got some heinous officers and some petty ones, just like criminals. Got some good and bad. But then when you mix them together and they come, I got to roll with you. You didn't see it on the news. I didn't roll with you. He was a top seniority. Yeah, but he broke the law. But we do it. We get plastered as villains.
Right.
I wanted to just come back to this idea of white fear in the police for a second, because I think that like there's something really there. First of all, I want to say like the production of white fear is grounded in like our racial history, right? You think about the way in which like the Central Park Five, the narrative around the Central Park Five, that these were these super predators, like these young Black boys were these super predators, and all, like that's producing white fear, right? And then the police come in and enforce that. And we saw that with Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman, right? Stand your ground. George Zimmerman was able to say, I felt scared, that's why I could shoot Trayvon, right? We saw the same thing with Michael Brown. The narrative around Michael Brown was, I felt like he was a demon, like I couldn't stop him. And so I was able to shoot him dead. You know, we see the same thing, like fear, the way in which the example with housing value and what LaDonna was just talking about, right? Like white fear allowing the police to come in, clean up the neighborhood, and suddenly the housing values are all up and the neighborhood gets gentrified. Like, I think that's a critical point that we want to bring here, is like the way in which police are mobilized to protect a sense of security for white folks. And it's not meant to do that for other folks. You don't think Trayvon was scared when George Zimmerman was chasing after him down when it was dark out down in Florida? Like, that's just crazy, you know? And like the fear of Black and brown folks doesn't register in the way that white people's fears do. And like, that's just something that we really got to wrestle with, like as a community, as we collectively try to figure this out together.
I have a question. Now, it's cool. The white people will call the police on us. We loitered, quote unquote, loitered in front of their stores. But as long as we spending their money, they don't call the police. I don't get that. So you just let the problem escalate. Then when something happened, they're always trouble. It's crazy.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the white fear is, why is white fear valued more than Black and brown fear? Like, just about, you know, how I was saying over the weekend when I was just driving down the street and having a panic attack because the police were all around me. Like, that's not valuable. Nobody cares about that. No one cares about that story. They're like, okay, fine, like move on. But you know, Karen feeling safe in her neighborhood is way more important than that. And that's something to think about. But I want to thank all of our panelists so much. I think this was a great conversation, and it's not going to be the only conversation. This needs to continue, and we need to continue to think about how are we replacing the police? What are we doing instead? What are our strategies? That kind of thing. And this is the work, right? Us coming together from all different walks of life, all different ages, different organizations, and saying enough is enough. So I really appreciate our panelists. Thank you so much for agreeing to be here. I really honor your expertise and your experience. It's really been great.
Hey, excuse me, I don't mean to be putting my nose where it don't belong. Do any of you guys be having regular meetings with the authorities downtown, like the commissioner, mayor, and stuff like that?
I'll let other people answer.
Allie.
I had one meeting with Chief Hain. It's not a regular meeting.
One?
Yeah, it was only one meeting, and then a couple weeks later, his officers were pushing me on the ground. So,
oh wow,
I don't really have any interest in meeting with him, at least
working
right
with
now.
the feds is not great.
I will say that we are regularly meeting with commissioners to try to make our case known, to say, you know, because really they're the ones that have the power at this point to defund the police, or at least to get us to, you know, right now, in case folks don't know, there's like a budget floor. Like, we can't go below 32% of the city budget being dedicated towards police. That's a law written in our city charter. We can't get below that. And so we're meeting with commissioners regularly to try to get to that. And then the goal is to eventually be able to amend the charter so that we can get even lower.
Yeah, so that outside game is really important, putting pressure from the outside, but also being in the room where it happens, right? So I know one of our questions in the chat, I think, was what are the most helpful ways to evoke defund the police change in Grand Rapids? And I just want to wrap up by giving those announcements again about how you can get plugged into our work with Defund the GRPD. One of the ways that you can do that is through following our page. Follow us on Facebook, Defund the GRPD. Order our magnets and distribute the magnets to your folks. We're going to put, that's our Facebook page, but if we could also put the magnets up there, there's our order form. The link to order those magnets are in the comments. They are free to you, and they will be delivered. All you have to do is fill out that order form, and you could be saving lives. You could be stopping police brutality in your community if you just stop and think, can I call somebody else instead? So order our magnets, please. We take care of us. That's really important. We also have our police contact form. We want to collect stories about police violence, about police interactions, so people know that the stuff that we are talking about today, it happens here. We want to talk about how the police haven't been helpful, that kind of thing. So please fill that out. Like I said, you can remain anonymous if you would like to. And just how we were talking about evoking change with the city commission, follow our page for commission meeting summaries as well. We'll have the commission meeting summaries where we'll give highlights of what happened in the commission meeting if you don't have time to watch fully the city commission, because as Kyle was saying, they are the ones who really evoke change in terms of getting that police budget down to that 32% right now. And we'll also on our page, we'll have random calls to action, like here, fill out this email, put out a letter, that kind of thing to the city commission. We'll often be posting actions. But also follow Justice for Black Lives, Allie's organization. They're really good at doing on the ground work and doing direct action. They've been a very pivotal part of that this summer. Follow Together We Are Safe, that LaDonna created. And that is with housing, community accountability, creating new models, all of those things. Follow Grand Rapids Area Mutual Aid Network, that is getting direct cash funds to Black and Brown people, because clearly the city is not giving us direct funds and wants to give that to police. So follow these amazing organizations as we can imagine a new world together. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have a great rest of your night.
Thanks for having us.
You too.